Transforming America. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Well, we're in the middle of changing presidents here as I record this in December of 2020. And we're hearing some of the same quotes we've heard before. Here's one from a recent publication. President-elect Joe Biden, along with Bernie Sanders, appointed people to 6 task forces, quote, which will be essential to identifying ways to transform our country, end quote. That's why my subject today is transforming America. Do we want to transform America? And how should we transform America based on Christian economic principles? Well, if you want to transform it, you might look back at the recent Trump administration, one of the most successful economic administrations of my lifetime. Here's a quote from the Wall Street Journal, September 18, 2018. Real median household income, by real they mean adjusted for inflation. Household incomes went up 1.8% in just 1 year. That was 2016 to 2017, while the poverty rate went down 0.4 percentage points. Income gains were strongest among Hispanic households. The poverty rates for blacks and Hispanics fell to the lowest rate since it's been recorded in 1972, and unemployment for those groups found historic lows. So if you're looking for a way to transform the economy, particularly to a way which works for everyone, you need to look only at the policies of President Trump. He did something really amazing. So do we want the poor to get rich at a faster rate than the rich? This is very hard to do. My wife, Ginger, who has not studied economics, but she's a really smart lady, she looks at it practically and she said, okay, well, you start an economy, somebody has 100,000 in the bank and somebody has 10,000 in the bank. As the economy increases, the 100,000 guy is going to get rich faster than the 10,000 guy. Isn't that right? And Ginger is correct in almost all instances except for the Trump administration. It was during the Trump administration the poor got rich at a faster rate than the rich. How can this happen? Well, the economics answer is simply increased demand. There was so much increased demand for employment that people at the bottom scales were increasing their wealth faster than the people at the top who already had jobs. This is just an amazing thing to look back at. We will really look back at the economy during the Trump administration and say, how did this happen? Here's back to a quote from Barack Obama just a few days before his first inauguration in January of 2009. He said, quote, we are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming America, end quote. This should make you nervous about what kind of transformations are going to take place. And I've mentioned in a previous podcast that President Obama tried to transform America but didn't change it very much. If you want to say more people have the chance at getting wealthy, I've done this in class many times. I've asked students in small groups, say, what do you think the chances are that any of you will be in the top 10% of income makers in your lifetime? And also, how many of you do you think will be in the top 20? I don't mean for them specifically in class, but I mean in the nation. Now think about this with me. Currently, in the top 10% of income earners are 10%. But it doesn't stay. It changes. See, people always talk about income inequality, which I need to do a couple of podcasts on probably. But what they always look at is that the gap is getting greater, and that is true in most cases, except for the Trump administration. In most cases, it is getting greater. But what they fail to look at, and this comes from Thomas Sowell in his book, Disparities and Discrimination, he said what they fail to look at is movement. See, people are moving all over, and so you're comparing people at different times. And so I asked these students in class, how many people do you think over their lifetime serve at least 1 year in the top 10% and then in the top 20%? So think about this. The media wants you to think it's 10, right? In the top 10%, they're there, they're locked in, the rich stay rich, the poor stay poor, people don't move. Well, the media is wrong. There are numbers to support this. And I'm about to give you the number. I wish we had time to be in person and like I do it in the classroom. And students give me estimates of how many people over their lifetime will spend at least a year in the top 10% and in the top 20% of income earners from Census Bureau data. Here's the answers. The chances that somebody will be in the top 10%, 56. Hold it. 56% of Americans spend at least 1 year in the top 10% of income earners. 20%, of course, it's even going to be greater, right? I mean, you should be astounded when I tell you this number. 73% of Americans spend at least 1 year in the top 20% of income earners. Okay, if you know anything about income quintiles, you've just stopped the podcast to tell your spouse. I mean, this is just an amazing data point. 56% spend at least 1 year in the top 10%. 73% spend at least 1 year in the top 20%. And you want to transform that? Just yesterday, Biden administration announced a bunch of their economic policymakers, and a few of them said the same thing. We want an economy that works for everyone. We have an economy that works for everyone. 56% make it to the top 10%. 73% make it to the top 20%. Oh, and these people in the top 1% who the media wants to tell you they're there, they're glued there, they never get out, they're the rich, always stay rich. Here's another data point that'll blow your mind. What percent of people stay in the top 1% for 10 consecutive years? 0.6%. 0.6%. That means 99.4 move out at least 1 year during those 10 years. So the economy moves. The economy transforms itself. It doesn't need to be transformed from the outside. As a matter of fact, now you'll have to look back at my podcast on economic humanism for that subject, but that's something different. So we have determined in previous podcasts also that President Obama, during his 8 years in office, 3 things. Never hit a 3. He was slow and he was expensive. Never hit a 3. Okay, he never hit 3% GDP growth in any year. He's the first president since Herbert Hoover in 1928 to not do so. The first one, never hit a 3. He was slow, meaning he set a record. He led us through the slowest recovery of any of the, depending on you count them, 10 or 11 recessions we've had since World War II. And he was expensive. He's increased the national debt, but that's not my subject today. That gets worse and worse, by the way. I did my podcast number 8 on national debt, and I need to do at least one more because this has just totally gotten out of control. So President Obama had 3 economic problems. Number 1, statistically, he never hit a 3. 2, he set a record for leading us through the slowest recovery of any of the recessions since World War II, and he increased the debt. And he says he wants to fundamentally change the country. That's what the Biden administration is saying. Biden served 8 years as vice president to Obama. So we need to look back and say, well, are we going to have the same policies? If so, that's not how we want to transform the country. And so when you hear this phrase, fundamentally transform the country, if you ask Dave Arnott, the fundamentals are we have Judeo-Christian values. Number 2, we have a Republican form of democracy. And 3, we have mostly a free market capitalist system. So the question remains, which of those 3 do you want to change? If you're going to fundamentally change America, which is the phrase they often use, which of those 3 fundamentals are you going to change? Or do you have your own list? And again, this is just mine. This is very subjective. This is Dave Arnott saying, when I look at our nation, we have 3 fundamentals: Judeo-Christian values, a Republican form of democracy, and free market capitalism. Dennis Prager says it this way. He says, I can find the American values on every coin. 3 things for him. Number 1, in God we trust. 2, liberty. 3, e pluribus unum. That's what Dennis Prager says. So let's look back at the Obama administration for 8 years. In God we trust. In 2 elections, he said marriage is determined by God as between a man and a woman. Then he lit the White House in rainbow colors when the Supreme Court declared homosexual marriage legal. In God we trust. So did Barack Obama trust in God or not? Economics, right? A guy named Gregory Mankiw teaches at Harvard. He wrote the book I use in my classroom, was speaking at the Dallas Fed last year. And it was interesting. He said, they are our elected followers, not our elected leaders. And we all kind of looked at him with a questioning face. And he said, look, and he told the story that I just told you. In 2 elections, President Obama said marriage is between a man and a woman as determined by God. Then when the public decided they wanted gay marriage, he did too. Gregory Mankiw's point, he's not our elected follower. He's our elected leader. I'll see if I can get through 2 more here from Dennis Prager. Prager says, in God we trust, liberty, and e pluribus unum, they're all in the coin. That's in God we trust. 2, liberty. The Obama administration, with Joe Biden as its vice president, reduced liberty. Here's an article from the Wall Street Journal, August 2016. President Obama's regulators have completed their 600th major rule. A major rule imposes costs of more than $100 million. For those keeping score, that's an average of 81 big rules a year, or roughly one every 3 days the government is open. Sam Batkins of the American Action Forum, who did the study, calculates the economic cost of all this regulation adds up to $743 billion. Now, million, billion, trillion, you get confused. Let me go back to a quote from the Wall Street Journal article again. Sam Batkins offers some comparative cost perspective. $743 billion is larger than the GDP of Norway and Israel combined. It amounts to a regulatory tax of $2,294 on every American. This eventually shows up in higher prices or fewer jobs created or reduced profits and wages. So again, as we look at the Biden administration saying they're going to have an economy that works for everyone and they're going to transform it, what do they mean by that? Because when Joe Biden was vice president, regulations increased the cost of $2,294 on every American. That's just regulation. And I'm trying to work through the 3 points that Prager says. In God we trust, liberty, and e pluribus unum. Not my subject today, so I'll get through that one quickly. E pluribus unum means out of many one. Well, here's one data point. 70% said the country was more divided at the end of the Obama administration than when it began. That's not much economics, not my subject, I'll leave it. Dennis Prager says 3 values. In God we trust, liberty, e pluribus unum. All 3 were reduced by the Obama administration with Joe Biden as its vice president. Okay, so now let's look at progressive versus conservative views. Okay, the Trump administration had this phrase, make America great again. That assumes that we had something and we lost it. We hear from the new Biden administration, they want to fundamentally transform. That assumes we've never had it. We never had something good. Do you see the difference? So conservatives say we want to conserve because we think there was something good in there. Whereas liberals say, no, we want to fundamentally transform because there was not something good in there. Listen, Christians believe there was something good in there, so we need to find the good and praise it, to quote Alex Haley, the author of Roots. Not destroy the whole thing. In other words, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I covered this in podcast 13 when I talked about a book by Yuval Levin called The Great Debate between the U.S. Revolution and the French Revolution. We believe as Christians in progressive renewal, not destruction. There's some really great quotes. I don't have time for all of them today. From Albert Walters in a really theologically heavy book called Creation Regained. Here's what Walters says. Jesus' miracles not only attest to the truth of his preaching concerning the coming of the kingdom, but actually demonstrate that coming. Christ's healing constituted actual evidence of his kingship over the power of sickness and Satan. In connection with our theme of recreation, it is particularly striking that all of Jesus' miracles, with the exception of one, the cursing of the fig tree, all the others are miracles of restoration. Restoration to health, restoration to life, restoration to freedom from demonic possession. Albert Walters, Creation Regained. What Walters is saying is we need to return to something better. We don't destroy, and we don't fundamentally transform. We find the good and praise it, again, to quote Alex Haley from Roots. Here's another quote from Albert Walters in Creation Regained. No societal order is absolutely corrupt. Thus, no societal order need ever be totally condemned. And we also do not place our confidence in blueprints and conceptions of the ideal society, end quote, Albert Walters in Creation Regained. So this says to us, the conservatives have the more Christian view, which is we need to conserve what was done in the past because we believe God was there. Imperfect humans made the rules and made the society. So we need to gently change it and renew it, but not to fundamentally transform it. That's the whole idea. As, when our country was formed, we had slavery. We worked our way out of slavery. We now have abortion. My hope is we are working our way out of abortion. You tend to think these things happen in one day. They really do not. They don't happen in one day. They happen slowly over time. If you're looking about changing things, there's a good book called To Change the World by James Davison Hunter. And he says, the problem with the world is me. See, that's the Christian worldview. We think the problem with the world is fallen humans. Now, an activist will say, there's nothing wrong with me. What's wrong is society. So as a college professor, if I was an activist, and I believe that, I would train my students up and I would send them out to change society. But I don't believe that. I think what's wrong with the world is me. What is wrong is inside humans, not outside them. Right? So there's this philosophical understanding of the world. So when people are activists, they're saying, well, there was nothing good in the founding of America, and there's nothing good in our fundamentals. We need to destroy them. Christians don't believe that. Second, then what do? Well, Christians believe we gently renew. We do not destroy and start over. And this is what How to Change the World by James Davison Hunter has to say. Yeah, so I'm going to get into this one and again in another podcast, and I've already covered it once. Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776. James Watt developed the steam engine in 1776, and James Wilson signed the Declaration in the United States in 1776. 3 Scotsmen transformed the world in 1776 in a way that it will never be transformed again. Is that what you mean by transformation? If so, I'm for it. But you have to realize, these guys took things that already existed. James Watt didn't even invent the steam engine. He just perfected the one that he had. Adam Smith already had economics. He just refined it and renewed it, which Albert Walters would call it, by the way. And James Wilson, in helping to write the Declaration and then the Constitution, these things that existed, particularly state constitutions in the colonies, these are 3 fascinating examples. All Scotsmen, all 1776. We are all richer today because of what these 3 guys did, the way they renewed their discipline in 1776. I just pray that we can do as equally as well. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist, where our slogan is, fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.